The Book of Wisdom, Chapter 13, Digression on False Worship. A. Nature Worship. Foolish by nature were all who were in ignorance of God, and who from the good things seen did not succeed in knowing the one who is, and from studying the works did not discern the artisan. Instead, either fire or wind, or the swift air, or the circuit of the stars, or the mighty water, or the luminaries of heaven, the governors of the world, they considered gods. Now, if out of joy in their beauty they thought them gods, let them know how far more excellent is the Lord than these, for the original source of beauty fashioned them. Or if they were struck by their might and energy, let them realize from these things how much more powerful is the one who made them. Far from greatness and the beauty of created things, their original author by analogy is seen. But yet for these the blame is less. For they have gone astray, perhaps, though they seek God and wish to find him. For they search busily among his works, but are distracted by what they see, because the things seen are fair. But again, not even these are pardonable. For if they so far succeeded in knowledge that they could speculate about the world, how did they not more quickly find its Lord? B. Idolatry. But wretched are they, and in dead things are their hopes, who termed gods things made by human hands. Gold and silver, the product of art, and images of beasts, or useless stone, the work of an ancient hand. The carpenter and wooden idols. A carpenter may cut down a suitable tree and skillfully scrape off all its bark, and deftly plying his art, produce something fit for daily use, and use the scraps from his handiwork in preparing his food, and have his fill, and the good for nothing refuse from these remnants, crooked wood grown full of knots. He takes and carves to occupy his spare time. This wood he models with mindless skill, and patterns it on the image of a human being, or makes it resemble some worthless beast. When he has daubed it with red, and crimsoned its surface with red stain, and daubed over every blemish in it, he makes a fitting shrine for it, and puts it on his wall, fastening it with a nail. Thus he provides for it lest it fall down, knowing that it cannot help itself, for truly it is an image and needs help. But when he prays about his goods or marriage or children, he is not ashamed to address the thing without a soul. For vigor he invokes the powerless, for life he entreats the dead, for aid he beseeches the wholly incompetent. For travel, something that cannot even walk, for profit in business and success with his hands, he asks power of a thing with hands utterly powerless. Chapter 14. Again, one preparing for a voyage and about to traverse the wild waves cries out to wood more unsound than the boat that bears him. For the urge for profits devised this ladder, and wisdom the artisan produced it. But your providence, O Father, guides it. For you have furnished even in the sea a road, and through the waves a steady path, showing that you can save from any dangers, so that even one without skill may embark. But you will that the products of your wisdom be not idle. Therefore people trust their lives even to most frail wood, and were safe crossing the waves on a raft. For of old, when the proud giants were being destroyed, the hope of the universe, who took refuge on a raft, left to the world a future for the human family under the guidance of your hand. For blessed is the wood through which righteousness comes about. But the handmade idol is accursed, and its maker as well, he for having produced it, and the corruptible thing because it was teemed a god. Equally odious to God are the evildoer and the evil deed, and the thing made will be punished with its maker. Therefore, upon even the idols of the nations shall a judgment come, since they become abominable among God's works, snares for human souls, and a trap for the feet of the senseless, the origin and evils of idolatry. For the source of wantonness is the devising of idols, and their invention a corruption of life. For in the beginning they were not, nor can they ever continue. For from human emptiness they came into the world, and therefore a sudden end is devised for them. For a father afflicted in untimely mourning made an image of the child so quickly taken from him, and now honored as a god that once was dead, and had endowed to the household mysteries and sacrifices. Then in the course of time the The impious practice gained strength and was observed as law. Engraven things were worshipped by royal decrees. People who lived so far away that they could not honor him in his presence copied the appearance of the distant king and made a public image of him they wished to honor, out of zeal to flatter the absent one as though present, and to promote this observance among those to whom it was strange. The artisan's ambition provided a stimulus, for he perhaps is in his determination to please the ruler. Labored over the likeness to the best of his skill, and the masses, drawn by the charm of the workmanship, soon took as an object of worship the one who shortly before was honored as a human being, and this became a snare for the world, that people enslaved to either grief or tyranny conferred the incommunicable name on stones and wood. Then it was not enough for them to err in their knowledge of God, but even though they live in a great war resulting from ignorance, they call such evils peace. For while they practice either child sacrifices or occult mysteries or frenzied carousing and erotic rites, they no longer respect other lives of purity of marriage, but they either waylay and kill each other or aggrieve each other by adultery. And all is confusion, blood and murder, theft and guile, corruption, faithlessness, turmoil, perjury, disturbance of good people, neglect of gratitude, besmirching of souls, unnatural lust, disorder in marriage, adultery, and shamelessness. For the worship of infamous idols is the reason and source and extreme of all evil. For they either go mad with enjoyment, or prophesy lies, or live lawlessly, or lightly perjure themselves. For as their trust is in lifeless idols, they expect no harm when they have sworn falsely. But on both counts, justice shall overtake them, because they thought perversely of God by devoting themselves to idols, and because they deliberately swore false oaths, despising piety. For it is not the mighty of those by whom they swear, but the just retribution of sinners that ever follows upon the transgression of the wicked. Wisdom chapter 15. But you, our God, are good and true, slow to anger and governing all with mercy. For even if we sin, we are yours, and know your might. But we will not sin, knowing that we belong to you. For to know you well is complete righteousness, and to know your might is the root of immortality. For the evil creation of human fancy did not deceive us, nor the fruitless labor of painters, a form smeared with varied colors, the sight of which arouses yearning in a fool, till he longs for the inanimate form of a dead image, lovers of evil things and worthy of such hopes, and they who make them and long for them and worship them, the potter's clay idols. For the potter, laboriously working the soft earth, molds for our service each single article. He fashions out of the same clay both the vessels that serve for clean purposes and their opposites all alike. As to what shall be the use of each vessel of either class, the worker in clay is the judge. With misspent toil he molds a meaningless god from the self-same clay, though he himself shortly before was made from the earth, and is soon to go whence he was taken, when the life that was lent him is demanded back. But his concern is not that he is to die, nor that his span of life is brief. Rather, he vies with goldsmiths and silversmiths, and emulates molders of bronze, and takes pride in fashioning counterfeits. Ashes his heart is, more worthless than earth is his hope, more ignoble than clay his life, because he knew not the one who fashioned him. Him breathed into him a quickening soul and infused a vital spirit. Instead, he esteemed one life a mere game, and our span of life a holiday for gain. For one must, says he, make a profit in every way, be it even from evil, for more than anyone else he knows that he is sinning. When out of earth and stuff he creates fragile vessels and idols alike, but most stupid of all and worse than senseless in mind, are the enemies of your people who enslave them, for they esteemed all the idols of the nations as gods, which cannot use their eyes to see, nor nostrils to breathe the air, nor ears to hear, nor fingers on their hands for feeling, even their feet are useless to walk with. For it was a mere human being who made them, one living on borrowed breath, who fashioned them. For no one is able to fashion a god like himself. He is mortal, and what he makes with lawless hands is dead. For he is better than the things he worships. He at least lives, but never his idols. Second example resumed. Besides, they worship the most loathsome beasts. As regards stupidity, these are worse than the rest, for beasts are neither good-looking nor desirable. They have escaped both the approval of God and his blessing. Wisdom, chapter 16. Therefore they were fittingly punished by similar creatures and were tormented by a swarm of insects. Instead of this punishment, you benefited your people with a novel dish, the delight they craved, by providing quail for their food, so that those others, when they desired food, should lose their appetite even for necessities, since the creatures sent to plague them were so loathsome, while these, after a brief period of privation, partook of a novel dish, for inexorable want had to come upon those oppressors. But these needed only to be shown how their enemies were being tormented, for when the dire venom of beasts came upon them, and they were dying from the bite of crooked serpents, your anger endured not to the end, but as a warning for a short time they were terrorized. Though they had a sign of salvation to remind them of the precept of your law, for the one who turned toward it was saved, not by what was seen, but by you, the Savior of all. By this also you convinced our foes that you are the one who delivers from all evil, for the bites of locusts and of flies slew them, and no remedy was found to save their lives, because they deserved to be punished. But not even the fangs of poisonous reptiles overcame your children, for your mercy came forth and healed them. For as a reminder of your injunctions, they were stung, and swiftly they were saved, lest they should fall into deep forgetfulness and become unresponsive to your beneficence. For indeed, neither herb nor application cured them, but your all-hearing word, O Lord, for you have dominion over life and death. You lead down to the gates of Hades and lead back. Human beings, however, may kill each other with malice, but they cannot bring back the departed spirit or release the soul that death has confined. Your hand no one can escape. Third example, a rain of manna for Israel instead of the plague of storms. For the wicked who refused to know you were punished by the might of your arm, were pursued by unusual rains and hailstorms and unremittent downpours, and were consumed by fire, for against all expectation, in water which quenches everything, the fire grew more active. For the universe fights on behalf of the righteous, then the flame was tempered, so that the beasts that were sent upon the wicked might not be burnt up, but that these might see and know that they were struck by the judgment of God. And again, even in the water, fire blazed beyond its strength, so as to consume the produce of the wicked land. Instead of this, you nourished your people with food of angels, and furnished them bread from heaven, ready to hand, untoiled for, endowed with all delights, and conforming to every taste. For this substance of yours revealed your sweetness toward your children, and serving the desire of the one who received it was changed to whatever flavor each one wished. Yet snow and ice withstood fire and were not melted, so that they might know that their enemies' fruits were consumed by a fire that blazed in the hail and flashed lightning in the rain. But this fire, again in order and righteous, might be nourished, forgot even its proper strength, for your creation serving you, its maker, grows tense for punishment against the wicked, but is relaxed in benefit for those who trust in you. Therefore, at that very time, transformed in all sorts of ways, it was serving your all-nourishing bounty according to what they needed and desired, that your children whom you loved might learn, O Lord, that it is not the various kinds of fruits that nourish, but your word that preserves those who believe you. For what was not destroyed by fire melted when merely warmed by a momentary sunbeam, to make known that one must give you thanks before sunrise and turn to you at daybreak. For the hope of the ungrateful melts like a wintry frost and runs off like useless water. Wisdom, chapter 17. Fourth example, darkness afflicts the Egyptians while the Israelites have light. For great are your judgments, and hard to describe. Therefore the unruly souls went astray, for when the lawless thought to enslave the holy nation, they themselves lay shackled with darkness, fettered by the long night, confined beneath their own roofs as exiles from the eternal providence. For they who supposed their secret sins were hid under the dark veil of oblivion were scattered in fearful trembling, terrified by apparitions. For not even their inner chambers kept them unafraid, for crashing sounds on all sides terrified them, and mute phantoms with somber looks appeared. No fire had force enough to give light, nor did the flaming brilliance of the stars succeed in lighting up that gloomy night. But only intermittent fearful fires flashed through upon them, and in their terror they thought beholding these was worse than the times when the sight was no longer to be seen. And mockeries of their magic art failed, and there was a humiliating refutation of their vaunted shrewdness. For they who undertook to banish fears and terrors from the sick soul themselves sickened with ridiculous fear. For even though no monstrous thing frightened them, they shook at the passing of insects and the hissing of reptiles, and perished, trembling, reluctant to face even the air that they could nowhere escape. For wickedness of its nature cowardly testifies in its own condemnation, and because of a distressed conscience always magnifies misfortunes. For fear is naught but the surrender of the help that comes from reason, and the more one's expectation is of itself uncertain, the more one makes of not knowing the cause that brings on torment. So they, during that night, powerless though it was, since it had come upon them from the recesses of powerless Hades, while all sleeping the same sleep, were partly smitten by fearsome apparitions, and partly stricken by their soul's surrender, for fear overwhelmed them, sudden and unexpected. Thus, then, whoever was there fell into that prison without bars and was kept confined. For whether one was a farmer or a shepherd or a worker at tasks in the wasteland, taken unawares, each served out of an inescapable sentence. For all were bound by the one bond of darkness, and were it only the whistling wind, or the melodious song of birds in the spreading branches, or the steady sound of rushing water, or the rude crash of overthrown rocks, or the unseen gallop of bounding animals, or the roaring cry of the fiercest beasts, or an echo resounding from the hollow of these hills. These sounds, inspiring terror, paralyzed them, for the whole world shone with bright light and continued its works without interruption. But over them alone was spread oppressive night, an image of the darkness that was about to come upon them, yet they were more a burden to themselves that was the darkness. Wisdom chapter 18. But your holy ones had very great light, and those others who heard their voices, but did not see their forms, counted them blessed for not having suffered. And because they who formerly had been wronged did not harm them, they thanked them, and because of the difference between them pleaded with them. Instead of this you furnished the flaming pillar, a guide of the unknown way, and the mild sun for an honorable migration. For they deserved to be deprived of light and imprisoned by darkness. They had kept your children confined, though whom the imperishable light of the law was to be given to the world. The fifth example, death of the Egyptian firstborn. What are you guys doing? Hello? When they determined to put to death the infants of the holy ones, and when a single boy had been cast forth, then saved, as a reproof you carried off a multitude of their children, and made them perish all at once in the mighty water. That night was known beforehand to our ancestors, so that with sure knowledge of the oaths in which they put their faith, they might have courage. The expectation of your people was the salvation of the righteous and the destruction of their foes, for by the same means with which you punished our adversaries, you glorified us, whom you had summoned. For in secret the holy children of the good were offering sacrifice and carried out with one mind the divine institution, so that your holy ones should share alike the same blessings and dangers once they had sung their ancestral hymns of praise. But the discordant cry of their enemies echoed back, and the piteous wail of mourning. For a children was born to them, and the slave was smitten with the same retribution as the master. Sammy! Even the commoner suffered the same as the king, and all alike, by one common form of death, had countless dead, for the living were not even sufficient for the burial, since at a single instant their most valued offspring had been destroyed. For though they disbelieved at every turn on account of sorceries at the destruction of their firstborn, they acknowledged that this people was God's son. For when peaceful stillness encompassed everything, and that night in its swift course was half spent, your all-powerful word from heaven's royal throne leapt into the doomed land, a fierce warrior bearing the sharp sword of your inexorable decree, and alighted and filled every place with death, and touched heaven while standing upon the earth. Then at once visions and horrible dreams perturbed them, and unexpected fears assailed them, and cast half dead, one here, another there. They revealed why they were dying, for the dreams that disturbed them had proclaimed this beforehand, lest they perish unaware of why they endured such evil. The trial of death touched even the righteous, and in the desert a plague struck the multitude. Yet not for long did the anger last, for the blameless man hastened to be their champion, bearing the weapon of his special office, prayer, and the propitiation of incense. He withstood the wrath and put a stop to the calamity, showing that he was your servant. He overcame the bitterness not by bodily strength, but by force of arms. But by word he overcame the smiter, recalling the sworn covenants with their ancestors. For when corpses had already fallen one on another in heaps, he stood in the midst and checked the anger, and cut off its way to the living. For on his full-length robe was the whole world, and ancestral glories were carved on the 4 rows of stones, and your grandeur was on the crown upon his head. To these the destroyer yielded, these he feared, for this sole trial of anger sufficed. Wisdom chapter 19. But merciless wrath assailed the wicked until the end, for God knew beforehand what they were yet to do, that though they themselves had agreed to the departure and had anxiously sent them on their way, they would regret it and pursue them, for while they were still engaged in funeral rites and mourning at the burials of the dead, they adopted another senseless plan. Those whom they had driven out with entreaties, they now pursued as fugitives, for a compulsion appropriate to this ending drew them on, and made them forget what had befallen them, that they might complete the torments of their punishment, and your people might experience a glorious journey, while those others met an extraordinary death. For all creation, in its several kinds, was being made over anew, serving your commands that your children might be preserved unharmed. The cloud overshadowed their camp, and out of what had been water, dry land was seen emerging. Out of the Red Sea, an unimpeded road, and a grassy plain out of a mighty flood. Over this crossed the whole nation, sheltered by your hand, and they beheld stupendous wonders, for they raged about like horses and leapt like lambs, praising you, Lord, their deliverer. For they were still mindful of what had happened in their sojourn, how instead of the young of animals the land brought forth gnats, and instead of fishes the river swarmed with countless frogs. And later they saw also a new kind of bird. When prompted by desire, they asked for pleasant foods. For to appease them, quail came to them from the sea, and the punishments came upon the sinners, not without forewarnings from the violence of the thunderbolts. For they justly suffered for their own misdeeds, since they treated their guests with the more grievous hatred, for those others did not receive unfamiliar visitors, but these were enslaving beneficent guests, and not that only, but what punishment was to be theirs, since they received strangers unwillingly. Yet these, after welcoming them with festivities, oppressed with awful toils those who had shared with them the same rites, and they were struck with blindness, as those others had been at the doors of the righteous man. When surrounded by yawning darkness, each sought the entrance of his own door, for the elements, in ever-changing harmony like strings of the harp, produce new melody, while the flow of music steadily persists and can be perceived exactly from a review of what took place, for land creatures were changed into water creatures, and those that swam went over on land. Fire and water maintained its own strength, and water forgot its quenching nature. Flames, by contrast, neither consumed the flesh or the perishable animals that went about in them, nor melted the ice-like, quick-melting kind of ambrosial food. For every way, Lord, you magnified and glorified your people. Unfailing, you stood by them in every time and circumstance. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. God bless you.